Hello, GrowWire listeners, and welcome to the GrowWire podcast. I'm your host, Jason Maynard, and today I've got Charles Wachter with me in the studio. Charles is an Emmy-Winning executive producer and the owner of Hard 20 Productions. Charles and I talk about the intersection of media, advertising, branding, technology. He's produced hit reality shows, he's writing a book, and he even shares a story about what's it like to be an entertainment exec working with Apple. You do not want to miss it.
You're listening to the GrowWire podcast, a place where you'll learn the ins and outs of growing a business, running a business, or even taking your big idea, career, or personal development to the next level. It's all possible. Our host, Jason Maynard, the SVP of Marketing at Oracle NetSuite and the Editor-in-Chief of GrowWire.com, will take you on an exploration of growth through candid conversations with some of the most brilliant minds in entrepreneurship, entertainment, business development, and more. Whatever your goal, we know you'll walk away with the right tools to help fuel your own journey of growth.
Before we dive into storytelling with Charles, I want to thank our sponsors as always, Blue Microphones. Everyone has a story to tell. You're going to hear about some stories on this podcast. And if you are a storyteller, you probably know Blue Mics for their iconic Yeti microphone. It's helped millions of people find and amplify their voices. If you're thinking about doing your podcast like this, maybe you're going to record some music, you should try it. It'd be fun. You should do it on Blue's new Yeticaster. The complete mic and boom arm system, ready to connect to your laptop. It brings the ultimate broadcast studio setup to your home or office. Visit bluedesigns.com and use the code podcast at checkout for a very special price. Now this week on GrowWire, we've got an article in our financing series that's all about how to pursue angel investing. How do you raise that first bit of outside money? We actually talk about how to tap into angel networks, negotiate investments, while making sure you're not getting diluted and you're maintaining the control you need. Angel investing, this post will bring it all home for you. Check it out. All right, everybody, welcome to the GrowWire podcast. I'm Jason Maynard, and excited to have with me my buddy, executive producer, owner of Hard 20, Charles Wachter. Charles, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
This is cool to have you here. So you've been working in the media entertainment business and sort of the technology business now for a long time. Love to get sort of how did you break in? How did you grow? Where'd you grow up? How did you come about to getting to where you're at today?
Yeah, some people have that kind of, I knew when I was 7. I didn't know when I was 7. Or 17, and maybe 27.
Do we ever know anything at 17?
No.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Toronto. I'm a bit of a mutt. My mom's English, my dad's Swiss, and I'm Canadian, and now I'm American, so I have 4 passports. Nice. But I'm Canadian. I grew up in Canada. I left Canada when I finished high school. I went to school in the States, and like growing up, my mom raised me. She was self-made success. She literally started cleaning toilets in a retirement home. She actually came from a well-to-do family in England, but she just went off on her own, moved to Canada, just got the first job she could. And, by the time I was in high school, she was part of a company that grew from 4 retirement homes to 200.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, my mom was part of the whole building. She did the design build side of the retirement home business in Canada. But growing up, like we were, just living in a small townhouse, and my mom always instilled in me hard work. Doesn't matter if you're pushing a broom or running a company or a country. There was a really great school in the center of Toronto, and she would always drive by. The Prime Minister's son went to the school, and she would always drive by, and she said, well, why can't my son go there? I got in. I was an English lit kind of guy in high school, and I really fell in love with English and writing. Thought I was going to go into publishing, and got into Yale. And then went to Yale and still thought I was going to do publishing and lit. And then I was dating a girl who was applying to NYU grad film. I was like, I should apply to NYU grad film. She's like, you're going to get in. And they don't accept a lot of people. And I'd never made a film before. So I actually applied with my writing and fine art, because I was a fine art major as well. I got into film school. So that's literally how I got into entertainment. I was actually dating a girl who was getting into entertainment. And, it spoke to me. There was a lot of arts in my family on my mom's side. And certainly I had done a lot of writing and stuff like that. So I got into NYU grad film, and that was sort of the direction of my career, in terms of film. And I came out to LA in 2001, and then sold a movie, and then just started at the bottom.
Wait a minute, so how do you go from, you graduate NYU film.
Yeah.
And you sold a movie. Like, is that doesn't seem to happen a lot.
No.
So how did you come out here? Did you do the film in New York, or did you come out here and do it?
I wrote the film in New York. I didn't come out right away. And I wrote the film in New York. And, NYU grad film is kind of a fancy film school.
Yeah.
And so I think you get a little bit more attention for your stuff. And the indie scene in the late 90s was still really hot.
Yeah.
Right? It was still a real business. You could still make movies for 1, 5, 10, 15 million, which is really hard these days.
What was the film?
It was a horror film. And, it was a horror film called The Grimm. It was average at best. But it was, it was interesting enough for someone to want to see if they could get it made. And I was meant to direct it. So I wrote 70 drafts of that screenplay.
Wow.
And it never got made. And in the process, I was in LA at this point. And we moved out here because my girlfriend and now wife, Tara, was from California. And, I'm more of a commercial entertainment kind of guy. So LA made more sense than New York. And I just needed to make a living. I didn't come out here with nothing. And at the time, now we're in the golden age of scripted TV. In the time, there was no scripted TV. I mean, you were looking at procedurals on the 3 big networks. There's no scripted on cable. And sitcoms had actually just started to die around 2001, 2002, 2003 in terms of the grind of brand new sitcoms. And as a result, I started getting jobs just because they exist in doc, reality, live shows, all the other stuff on TV, which in the early days was like super verboten. And I remember I was about 2 or 3 years into that I started to realize it's fun. It's really complicated. There's a formality to scripted TV, and if you're the writer or director, certainly there's a true art. But the business of it is on rails in many ways, especially in TV.
Yeah.
And it was just bananas in reality. I mean, we were blowing through, $1, $2, $5, $10, $15 million in 3 weeks, and with nothing more than a piece of paper. A lot of times things were being greenlit. So it was a really good education in how to create structure and be able to deliver a project or an idea from start to finish in a way that, could air, right? And so I just found the problem interesting. It was chaotic. There was a lot of upside in opportunity, and then also the nice thing about TV, unlike film, film is zero sum, right? Like you invest all your money and it either hits or doesn't, and you're toast, or you invest years writing 70 drafts of a screenplay and it either gets made or it doesn't. There's no relationship between how hard you work and whether or not you hit the big time. Mm-hmm. What I love about TV is it's really like a pyramid. It's still an apprentice system. There's no way to get to the top of TV. Like film, you can come out of film school, write a hot script, be M. Night Shyamalan, and get $6 million for the script, and all of a sudden be a stud. It doesn't work that way in TV because it's such a kabuki sort of business. There's so many weird aspects and relationships and things to TV that you really just have to start at your bottom. I mean, I went to Yale and NYU grad film, and all that got me was my first PA job. They didn't call me a PA. They called me a production coordinator. I think they just felt guilty. But I was still labeling tapes and getting coffee, you know what I mean? So that's what's great about TV is that if you're a grinder and you start at the bottom, you can figure out how to get up.
And you worked on early on some of the groundbreaking reality shows. I mean, you were doing stuff like
I did The Bachelor.
And,
American Gladiators. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I was lucky in that I at least, as it was growing, I started at the sort of higher end of network television. Most of my work has been on network shows. Yeah. Also, I just sort of avoided, just on a spiritual level, the other side of reality, which gave it a bad name. Like I never had to do that.
One of the big ones that you worked on and you ended up winning an Emmy for was Jamie Oliver's Food Revolution.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that one, because that was different.
It was different
than some of the other ones that came before it.
It was interesting. So when we were at ABC, I remember Vicky Dummer, who was the head of Alternative with John Sadeh, said, she goes, "I don't know what the show is, but go with God." And it was partly because Jamie has this missionary zeal and following in England, and when the show was sold here, he's a purist to his own core brand. So what had started as another TV show, which was weird. I remember getting the call, right? Because the show was sold, and then my friend who named Craig Armstrong was called to run that show, and he called me and he told me about the show, and asked me if I wanted to do it with him. And I remember being like, you're going to take an English chef to like the unhealthiest city in America? You know, I didn't really get like, you know, I just had done Gladiators, I think, American Gladiators. But once we got into Jamie's brand and realized it was a hero's journey, you know, he was, you know, a foreign man in a foreign land, beset on all sides by, you know, ill health, you know, but only through his courage and ingenuity can he defeat the corporate, you know, behemoths that were holding the man down in West Virginia. Like once you saw that as like a narrative journey, it became amazing. And Jamie said to us, he goes, you know, we do what's right and good, and then we make it entertaining. And that was the first time I had ever encountered that idea in television. So, you know, I'm really proud of that show, primarily because, I mean, not because we won the Emmy, but because, you know, we, you know, affected a lot of change in the country. You know, West Virginia went from the worst to the best school food in the nation. We transformed 26 schools. LAUSD removed chocolate and strawberry milk from their schools, which was over 1 billion calories a day being fed to kids who are 50, 60, 70% obese in their school system. And then we also were heavily involved in the whole pink slime
I still remember that.
Yeah, which was a low-grade, E-grade beef that was in our food supply.
Yeah.
And famously, NBC News got sued for that because the company went out of business. So it was really meaningful, but it was also a classic hero's journey kind of story. And because it was real, it allowed us to really not have to do all the tricks of the trade to kind of drum up drama.
Yeah.
You know, they were really trying to stop us. He was really trying to do it. There was actually a campaign. And we were also in the media constantly with the show, so we were actually reacting to our own news in the show, which was just kind of meta.
And what do you learn from that, from an authentic content standpoint, right? Because your first gut was like, maybe this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
But you tapped into something that was actually kind of real.
There's shows called transformation shows that are shows where people, you know, you're trying to affect change on camera.
Yeah.
And I've done enough of them now that unless it's real, because people can be genuine. You know, I did a show with The Rock where we did a transformation show, and he genuinely cared and was engaged with helping people. But unless there is an engine for change beneath the show, unless there's actually a campaign or a movement behind it, you never get the transformation ultimately on camera because you can see it. You can see when lives have changed truly. That's why Extreme Home Makeover worked. You like literally ripped down a house and you literally built it.
Yeah.
You know, and those shows work best in their extreme. All those shows, any transformation show, you want to have the most extreme change.
How hard is it to figure out these categories in reality?
You know, what's weird, you know, reality and now TV as a general industry has grown so organically that we've found them as by necessity of needing to describe what kind of show it is, right?
Yeah.
We have all these industry terms, you know, OcuSoap, DocuSoap, competition, you know, like, you know, the certain types of game shows. Like we have all these different things, and it's partly because there's been no set of rules anyone's following by, you know, in television. And now we're seeing that as the distribution rules have broken down. First it was content rules. Like what count, was Survivor a show? Like they didn't even know if it was a show before when it was pitched. They're like, how is this a TV show?
Yeah.
And so we were dealing with a content way early in reality of like just content exploding, and they're becoming all these different ways of entertaining people. And now we're seeing it on the distribution and tech side as well. Like, and so now the business models are starting to become incredibly creative and complex, you know, and different people are putting chips down on, online is going to grow big and do premium. And then people are saying, no, the OTT people are where the only business models are. And so there's this chaos that everyone's operating in. We've been in chaos. I mean, my business has been in chaos like since day one.
Well, I mean, but even in the early days of reality, a lot of people hated these shows when they
hated them. Yeah,
they were like,
and they would say, "You went to Yale. Why do you do this?"
Yeah,
you know. And you know, my personal answer was, you know, I make entertaining shows. Like, you know, like, I didn't make shows that took advantage of people. But I would argue that people who are on those shows are really just in the process of entertaining as well, right? It's a different form of acting. Even if they believe their own reality in the situation. But I also had a family, you know, I was like, you know, new to LA, and so I was just grinding it out in the same way that anybody does when they start out in their career. But I soon saw that there was a lot of good that could happen from the type of TV, you know, whether it's American Gladiators is just fun, right, to watch. There's no difference between American Gladiators and watching a, you know, bang 'em up, you know, shoot 'em out cowboy.
Well, the people who hate him mostly were the critics, though. That's
Oh,
thing.
yeah, well,
do you know what I mean? It wasn't the people they became huge because people
listen,
liked
the
them.
great thing is I got a skin a mile thick. Like I could care less, really. I mean, because the truth is that if I were to apply a critical filter to all content, I would agree with them. I'd rather watch Game of Thrones or, a great scripted series or a fantastic film. I mean, I think everyone holds art and commerce and culture, or art and content to the same bar. It's just that you're servicing. Sometimes I just like watching dumb stuff on TV.
I loved American Gladiators.
Oh, it's so fun.
It was great. And the Rock Show, that was phenomenal. So, I mean, you found a category, if you will, of show that taps into what people are interested in.
Yeah, it's very zeitgeisty.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of chasing of pop culture in our show. Like if there's a big pop culture hit, there's a lot of people chasing it. And then there'll be 3 or 4 buys in it. And if it works, there'll be 5 or 6 buys in that genre or that space. And if it doesn't work, it'll go away.
Yeah.
Like crime, right? We saw Netflix, we saw Making a Murderer, and we saw Serial. And all of the crime programming came from those 2 shows. Yeah. And then OJ, Made in America, cemented it to the point now where networks are rebranding around crime. Like Oxygen was, a female-focused network, and now they're rebranding around crime. So that's how powerful that kind of...
You see it on, TBS as well as doing comedy, right? And TNT is doing the drama now, and it's kind of split that way.
Yeah.
So
I got a TBS show right now, actually. And it's really dumb. It's so good.
It's okay. Beavis and Butthead, man, defined... So that felt like my reality show when I was a teenager. So I was thinking of Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit because I think you've been in the middle of some of these changes. When you think about how brands, right, how they're advertising and how they're trying to reach audience, and then you think about the content creators have traditionally worked, and then the kind of the insertion of technology into the middle of this has started to really, as you talked about, kind of throw things up.
I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I think on the surface level, we all know the big, sort of buckets that's happened, right? Like, it used to be the brand would pay for access to distribution and eyeballs through the big networks. They were like just a few fat pipes, billions of dollars were going back and forth, and then the networks would have a chunk of money, and then they would basically decide which content creators got the money and how those shows rated determine how much more they would buy or buy something else. And what's been fascinating is that, the big competitors now, which are the OTT providers like Netflix and Amazon and YouTube and Facebook are, starting to try and figure it out properly. I mean, they're in the business, but they haven't really nailed it yet. Is that they're not interested in the big brands. Maybe YouTube and Facebook because they have that digital ad platforms that they want to leverage. And that's part of their pitch to us. But certainly Netflix and Amazon, it has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And I think in this day and age, it used to be that the distribution was the hammer, right? NBC could just control the marketplace with a good show because they, had the money to advertise. They got the eyeballs. They could promote their own shows. And, and to this day, NBC is really good at it still, and CBS and Fox for my friends there. They are now sort of facing the situation where they don't have that reach. They can't control the conversation anymore. And so content creators are constantly being expected to bring in shows that are self-marketing, right? Because they know their marketing dollar can't reach. And then, Amazon's putting $4.5 billion into content this year. Netflix is $8 billion. So you got $12 billion in content spend, and what's happening is it's stretching all of us thin because we're all selling shows, we're all making shows. And so it's actually a challenge because the business model has brought in a completely new revenue source. And so you've got all the ad-based brands on the side who used to have complete access to 10, 15, 20, all the way up to, obviously the Super Bowl, 100 million people. And they're losing that traction. And so a lot of it's gone obviously into digital. But I think brand control in digital is so chaotic. I don't think they get all the data metrics and all the deep dive.
It's much harder.
It's much harder for a brand perception kind of thing. And so now, what's interesting now is that brands are starting to act a bit more like media companies themselves because distribution has gotten close to net zero, and so has content creation, right? If you're doing it on the smaller scale. On the bigger scale, they're spending the dollars and getting the big names and stuff like that. But I'm seeing now more and more brands are interested in creating their own content, and there hasn't necessarily been a perfect outlet distribution platform that people are used to going to, but I don't think it's long before it's just direct content. It's like direct marketing, direct to consumer. Because think about Netflix. Imagine if Netflix, if Ford or Oracle had Netflix and they had that ability to go deep on, whatever the 20, 30 million people that are, consuming that content. They could not only create their entire brand about it. I actually have a crazy idea. Which I'll pitch you after. Or maybe I should pitch it now and then someone can call me.
Yeah.
But Netflix and Amazon are walls from a brand content point of view. And so brands are, we've been talking to Ford and some other big brands about original content. And branded content was tricky. Like, it's not like it's a new idea, branded content.
Well, what's interesting, if you take the Netflix dollars and the Amazon dollars and say that's $12 to $13 billion of content.
So crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
But the other way to look at it is that's $12 to $13 billion worth of content that does not have an advertiser.
Exactly.
Right? And it's this notion of how do you build a direct-to-consumer relationship, right?
Yeah.
Where you bypass that intermediary.
Yeah, well, there's an answer to that, right? And there's a secret behind that spend, right? They're not actually creating $12 billion to get the long tail necessarily. And I know Netflix is now starting to work the niches. I think they bought 70 unscripted shows last year, which was a first. They only had one 2 years ago.
Wow.
But it's not so much that they're chasing the long tail. They're actually just bludgeoning the search for the big hits. Because the premium OTT providers have the HBO model, which is like, we need 2 shows to get all our viewers, and they're going to subscribe, and then the lifetime value of that consumer is going to be X.
Yeah.
And they do their math, and they say, okay, we can spend, this is essentially their marketing budget.
Yeah.
Right? Their $8 billion is their marketing budget to get the viewers. Amazon, actually, I just found out, had a really interesting metric. They, what their internal rating system is not like ongoing ratings. It's how many first streamers did this new show get? And so they've got a calculation where they say, okay, this new show launched and we got 100,000 new streamers and the show costs us, say, $3 million an episode. And so they basically have like a grade that every show gets. And the higher you are up on that score sheet for pulling in new people, there's something interesting about like, oh, I should sign up for Netflix, I should sign up for Amazon. And that's how they green light stuff. So if you sign up to Amazon,
it's a proxy for your Prime membership.
Stream one of my shows first, even if you're going somewhere else.
Yeah. But that's a proxy for their, trying to get folks onto Prime, right?
That's it.
And getting them out.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a lifetime value.
Listen, I think the big giant, like whenever there's like crazy industry change is where the biggest opportunities are, right? For my business, it was Burnett, right? Like he shared half the advertising and owned Survivor, and he's a billionaire now. He also made Apprentice and Shark Tank and The Voice. So like the guy's just good.
Yeah.
When business models break, it's the people who are the ones that put it back together, right? Because it's going to get figured out really quickly. And so there's a lot of thought. Like, I'm a content guy, so I look at it more from a point of view of where can I sell and make stuff. But I think that people who figure out the structures that allow Ford and Oracle and all these guys to make direct-to-consumer content. Here's the other issue. I've been thinking about this a lot, by the way. The other issue with a direct-to-consumer, the branded content in the past, was it's all perception. It was all perception-based, right? Like you put your Coca-Cola cup on American Idol, you see this hopeful story, and your perception of that brand, right? But the eyeballs aren't there anymore. So you either you spread your money. I mean, you know infinitely better than I do. But you spread your money all over the place, looking for, sort of the halo effect around media and content that suits your brand, right? But you still don't have any of that deep data that you get from doing it online, where you can see how long and how much and how many and all that stuff. And I think as the gap closes between distribution and branded content, eventually they're going to touch, and the content buyers, the media, the brands, are going to finally get access to what's essentially the Netflix level data. When did they stop streaming? Were they engaged in this idea? We put our logo at the front, said sponsored by. We didn't put our logo at the front and said sponsored by. And I think once those two merge, once it's a true direct consumer market for brands to market directly to consumer, I think you're going to start to see that the spigots open up.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting attribution model analysis, right? In terms of where somebody watches, and then looking at the behavior and
does it convert?
Does it convert?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Is this in your Amazon example, that's a top of the funnel value to them, right? In terms of attracting a new subscriber.
Yeah, and think about the difference between just even like we lump Amazon and Netflix together, but the top of the funnel new customer at Amazon Prime and at Netflix are vastly different things.
Yeah, it's two different business models. One's a transactional model.
Yeah.
I mean, the Prime membership's not it's the goal.
Yeah.
But it's all the transactions that get facilitated off the back end.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting too is that what is still the same in Hollywood is that buyers are still like when I got a pitch at Netflix in a couple weeks, and the gatekeeper model is still the same, right? There's still 30 buyers that matter, or whatever the number is. I've never counted, but there's still but it's just that the war chest is just so enormous that the buying, at least at Netflix, they were buying a show a week. No, actually way more than that. I think I heard they're doing 1,000 original titles this year. Thank God Scripted's doing such a great job because there's so much fun programming for us as consumers.
Yeah.
And what happens is that as they overspend in one category, they underspend in the other, and there's always a push and a pull. The main thing that's happening is that the networks on the traditional side are savvier to the international and business side of content. It used to be that when you sold a show to NBC, you would retain, maybe like 50 years ago, but you would retain international. NBC was in the advertising business.
Yeah.
They didn't care what happened in Malaysia, right? And there was a gap for about 5 or 10 years where people were crushing, because you sell 10 episodes in America, 100 countries buy that episode. They've made money off their 10, but you've got 990, and so international distribution and the sort of global marketplace of content has shrunk. And so our business deals are tighter and more aggressive, right? Like they're buying out the world. And that's the extreme is in Netflix. So Netflix will they're already the world. There is no long tail.
Yeah.
Right? And the long tail used to be a really fat tail. And so to compete, Netflix would actually do a cost plus 30. So you'd actually get a 30% fee. Usually our fees are in the 10% range of the budgets. But now they were doing cost plus 30 because you were basically, they had to buy out the whole world, and they were competing with the networks that were still willing to give up some of that international distribution. So from a business standpoint, the business models are really aggressively changing, and it didn't used to be that the networks were interested in the business of the show, if that makes sense. I mean, they had departments and stuff, but production companies had the ability to market and leverage their shows more. And now with the increasing vertical sort of funnels that are being created around content, they're able to sort of step outside of their content brain and say, okay, we're going to own this, we're going to own this, we're going to own this. And you're still just trying to sell shows, so it only comes down to leverage.
Which American company started with a guy in a garage, was featured on Shark Tank, and now has over 1 million customers? Hint, they're reducing crime in neighborhoods everywhere. Here's Ring Video Doorbell founder Jamie Siminoff with his secret to success.
It's true. In just a few years, we've had huge growth. We've hired hundreds of people, expanded our warehouse, and we're shipping millions of units a year, all while making sure our customers are happy. I've had lots of things to worry about, but I never worry about our finance and accounting because we use NetSuite from Oracle. From the beginning, NetSuite let me see what's going on with my business in real time, from revenues to expenses, customers and orders, even HR. I run my business from a dashboard right on my phone. NetSuite has been my business management system from 10 to a team of over 1,000, and NetSuite will be my choice as we continue to innovate and grow.
Go to netsuite.com/ring to see how Jamie scaled his business. You'll also get our free guide titled Overcoming Your 5 Obstacles to Growth. That's netsuite.com/ring for your free guide and the story of a great American company. netsuite.com/ring.
Well, you worked on, and I think this is kind of a fascinating, this is going to be one of those things like 10 years from now. It's going to be like, you're going to look back at this and go, this was kind of cool. And it was cool, but you worked on Apple's first show, right? Planet of the Apps.
Yeah.
So talk about that, because that for a lot of folks in Silicon Valley, this was like Apple sort of responding maybe a little later than most people expected into this game. But it was in a different way, I think, than...
Yeah, what was interesting about that show was it had all the appearance of being branded content because we were so close to their core business with apps. But it was also their first content, and so there was an expectation or understanding that we got to make a show, right? That it's not an advertisement, and certainly I think that the merging of the two worlds was, that's why they greenlit the show, is because they saw a Shark Tank for tech and apps was an interesting thing. What was really probably the most fascinating thing about Apple as a producer, it wasn't what you'd expect. Like you'd expect the Apple attention to detail, which was there. You'd expect the control of the brand. You'd expect sort of just whatever the Apple version of a TV show. But actually what was most interesting and frustrating and fascinating was that it was like we were speaking two different languages. So when you make a show that's 10, 20, 30, whatever the budget, I'm not gonna say what the budget was, but a lot.
Sizable. When
you say, there are all these go, no go, we have a formal structure for making a show like that. Maybe 15 years ago it was a little, fly by the seat of your pants because we were making it up, creating the industry as we were in it. But now there's like a formal way you make a big show like that. But so we had all these go, no go moments and logic of how to make decisions. And Apple hadn't really created their entertainment division yet. And so when we were working with Apple, it was like we had enzymes that didn't have the right receptors, right? So we were like, hey, we need to know this. And they had no way to answer it because there was no process there necessarily that would answer that type of content question.
Interesting.
Like a perfect example was we had to start building our set, and we needed an approval on the set. It sort of went there, and a few of the higher up execs that were a part of the show weighed in, but they only weighed in on like kind of a global level. And then we were given to the live events team.
The people who put on like the like worldwide developer conference or the
so they showed up to the set, right? And their eye and attention to it was amazing, but they were sort of at one point I remember the woman was pointing out there aren't enough plugs on this wall, and I'm like, that's not a real wall. Like they're never going to be plugging in there, and it was just a different language, you know what I mean? And I think, listen, the truth is that Apple was figuring out how they wanted to get into it too, and so there was, I think, a lot of internal questions about how to make the show or how to support the show. I mean, Apple, to be honest, was one of the best experiences from a network point of view, mostly because I think they were taking the Netflix approach, which is like, okay, go with God a little bit.
Yeah, so they're still the wild card in this whole equation.
I mean, the problem that I see it happening with Apple and Facebook and YouTube, and it's really simple. They are Planet of the Apps, and the YouTubes and the Facebooks are building their content brand off of their own brand. And I associate Facebook with viral videos. I associate YouTube with personal content. And so they have to rebrand. These are massive brands that are like incredibly part of how we understand these brands. And they're buying content that's a version, like YouTube's, a lot of their first early buys were content that was like YouTube-esque. Like they took their biggest YouTube people and they made a big version of the show. It doesn't really work because it's not that type of content. Netflix could have gone a lot of different ways, but they just went super premium. And I think that is the thing that is actually cutting through all of the clutter, is that the stuff that is just really, really high end just cuts through the clutter because people find it.
Yeah, well, Netflix feels like an OTT version of HBO.
Exactly.
Right.
But there's a lot of bad stuff on Netflix. They just don't surface it because they've got like scale and volume, and so they greenlit 1,000 shows. 5 of them become massive hits. That's all you need. We don't have that much bandwidth for more than 5 anyways. Yeah. Right? Like how many shows did you watch? I watched like maybe 2.
Yeah, and then YouTube, what is even the YouTube Premium?
YouTube, it used to be called YouTube Red. Now it's called YouTube TV. And I think they're still building off of the YouTube brand and the unique aspects of creating content there. And I just think that if they want people to watch YouTube at a premium level, I think that they got to sort of swing higher and bigger and carve out a new brand above the fray.
That's interesting.
Because you got, like, if you think about it, YouTube is all like long tail content, and you've got like
cat
super
videos.
High end, right? But and I think the premise has been, well, we're going to grow the long tail back into the hockey stick, and people don't make that jump. We used to put YouTube stars, and now it's influencers and Instagrammers on shows, and the audiences don't travel. It's a different type of content.
Yeah.
They don't. Like, it never works. I mean, we put The Rock on, and he had like, 70 million or something like that. And, we're like, hey, we get 10% of his audience. We're going to be crushing. And it's a different content. People see content. There's content I veg up to. There's content I like scroll on my phone and stuff. And so that's been the big lesson, is like how to understand the viewer and how to get them in a world where marketing doesn't really work that well unless you spend $100 million.
Well, and the thing with YouTube also is like it feels like there was a leap from Apple iTunes to YouTube, right?
Yeah.
To watch or to listen to music.
Yeah.
Right. And then you could argue, then we hit Spotify.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
So there was this, and there's still obviously a lot of consumption of music on YouTube.
Yeah.
To try and then go, okay, we're going to make some high-end show.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to probably watch Peaky Blinders on YouTube.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's a failure of marketing more than anything, you know? I think that their brand has got a gravity well that they got to escape in terms of quality, right?
Yeah.
Like YouTube, by definition, it's not quality, it's personal, right? That's their brand. So they had to break out of that. Amazon did something completely different, which backfired massively, which is Amazon was like, okay, we're going to do Wisdom of the Crowds. We're going to release 20 pilots online, all of them. And then people are going to vote which ones they like, and we're going to watch them. So I did it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's how why rely on 3 executives' opinions when everyone can vote on what they like, right? Because usually the viewer never gets to see all our bad pilots, right? They're like, that didn't work, right? But now, and so the brand was really, it kind of messed up the Amazon brand in terms of quality at first, and then they kind of figured it out, and now they gone the complete opposite way. They just bought a $250 million, spend on just for the rights of Lord of the Rings.
Amazing.
We're spending $500 million on Lord of the Rings, and it's still just a TV show. It's going to start and it's going to end, and someone's got to write the dialogue, and it's just a TV show.
But that's the crazy thing about sort of the tech companies involved in this is that it's
the scale is just insane.
The scale is insane.
Yeah.
Where do you think about? So it's interesting if you sort of look at Apple, and they've got one business model in this sort of with iTunes and now with Apple Music. Is that a place where you think there's a bundling that makes sense with entertainment? Like, because you could try and make the leap of, well, maybe that, it's funny, there's an old saying in software, is that there's 2 ways to make money in software. You either bundle or you unbundle. Okay? What makes you win is figuring out the timing of when you pick that strategy.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Is simple bundling? Is that to try?
I think that bundling, skinny packages, I think they are just people trying to throw up walls to monetize content and distribution as it all disintermediates, right? Like, I think that eventually it's going to be all direct, including movies. The cable companies obviously reach and control of the cable purchase is still strong enough that they're just reacting to all the OTT. This is their way of reacting to the OTT. Make it cheaper, give you what you want. But it's not long before, I just hook up with The Rock and some investors, and we just get the $10-20 million, and we just go, there's a platform that monetizes that direct-to-consumer content, right? It puts risk back in the system if you're not a part of a distribution chain that it's already monetized. That's what's great about TV. People don't realize that TV and film are wildly different. Yeah. Film, you're taking $100, $10, $100, $200 million risk, right? And you could have 30 million, or you could have $1 billion, right? And so it's all very lottery based. You bring expertise, and you can muscle it if you're Disney just through sheer marketing and stuff. But TV, the money's already there. Yeah. It's like NBC's committing $200 million to content this year, and you're competing with your fellow content providers to get a piece of that, and that's the thing that's getting challenging, is that that's falling apart a little bit.
I want to spend a few more minutes on the brand side and the advertiser side, because I think that's the other part that's kind of tricky, and looking at if you're forget about business to business, because that's got its own little world, but if you're a traditional consumer brand and you're losing, if you will, sort of this traditional historical way that you reach your audience, how do these brands play into this? Are they? And you mentioned earlier a little bit about some of the work you're doing with some of the brands.
Yeah, I've done a lot of brand stuff. I created a show for ABC called Bet on Your Baby that Walmart paid for. My partner in my company, Ben Silverman, really was the architect for all of it. He said to me, I said I was doing this, and he's like, trade on my credits. He's a baller, which I am. So Ben connected with Walmart and P&G, and basically we sold a pilot to ABC, and then they funded the pilot. They funded the series for 2 seasons. And the trick to those pure branded content plays is they're really traditional brand perception type plays, right? But it's really hard to gauge what the value of it is, right? We did another show called Fashion Star, which I think is it probably is the closest you can get to a really synergistic relationship with the brand. It was a show, and I was just one of the producers making it. I didn't set the show up, but it was a show where designers would design ready-to-wear clothes each week, and then at the end of the week, they would walk it down the runway. And at the end of the runway, there was a buyer from Macy's, a buyer from Saks Fifth Avenue, and a buyer from H&M. And they each represent different sections of the industry. You know, you had high-end with Saks, and Macy's, which was like, middle America, and then H&M, which is like young and
fast fashion.
Yeah. The brands were organic to the show even existing. Like, we couldn't make the show without the brands being there to buy, and they had a spend of $5 million that they had agreed to be on the show. But what was really interesting was, unlike, say, Bet on Your Baby, where there wasn't necessarily a way to measure. I mean, I guess there's ways to measure. But
was Walmart doing like ad insertions, or they
a
doing
lot of times
brought
when you
by,
whenever you get a big media brand for a national advertiser, the network will build a media buy around the show, right? So you got to pay X to be in the show, or deficit the show, and then that's a negotiated exposure. And then usually there'll be a media spend around the show. So Walmart bought a lot of the ads around the show, and then Macy's was really aggressive with the ad buys around Fashion Star. But what was really different about Fashion Star was at the end of the show, if Macy's bought like Sarah's turquoise dress, we had shot that show 6 months before, and those dresses had been manufactured. And the second the show was over, you could buy those clothes. The conversion rate was through the roof because they just spent an hour with this woman who was like crying, and she's a mom, and then she has this gorgeous dress, and then we put on this huge fashion show, and then Macy's, is like, yeah, we're gonna, I think it was Saks for her, and then 5 seconds later you can go and see what it costs. And so they were getting like 30, 40, 50% bumps on their traffic right after the shows, and the clothes were selling out in like less than a minute. And they loved it. The brands loved it. But the problem was, it was a different business model. That was their business model of getting exposure and push to their websites, which worked. And then you had the network, which is looking at the ratings and looking at their upfronts, and are they going to be able to sell enough ads to support the budget of that show. And so that's always the issue with TV and brands, is that they're always separate, completely different businesses, and yet they have to make the same product together.
Well, how hard is it too for brands to build authentic content that people want to see?
Yeah.
Versus
you know what? I've got a buddy who actually used to work here at Oracle. His name's Casey Jones. He was a marketer.
Yes.
Do you know Casey?
We connected because of you.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love Casey. Oh yeah. He told me that. Yeah. Anyways, we talk about this a lot, and one of the big challenges to branded content is that there's no strategists. That the content creators create content and they pitch to the brands, right? And then the brands are like trying to take this blue thing and put it into their red car or whatever it is, right? But if you think about traditional advertising, is that there's the strategy portion that leads the creative is really important, because that's what allows the creative to work in a box that works with the brand, right? And we don't have that in TV, like zero. It's like direct. We're missing that Rosetta Stone. And so we've been talking about how do you build strategy more aggressively, so when I create a show, that brand, I'm actually servicing that brand in a really like kind of direct way and not tangentially. So that's the first issue, is like, what's the content, what's the brand content? And then the second thing is, how do you show the brand that this spend has value? And that's the harder thing, right?
There's got to be some assumption that there's an implicit bump in conversion.
Exactly.
However you want to measure it, right?
Yeah. And so that's something that we've been Casey and I have been talking a lot about, is how you distribute the show in a way that the brands can see that there is a value to it, because otherwise it's just a gamble. And what's another interesting thing is, TV shows are businesses. We make money, right? And so a lot of times producers will pitch to a brand, be like, and we're going to make a lot of money on this show, and then certainly I've discovered over the years, and certainly Casey reminds me, is that like, they're not that. This is a marketing spend. They don't. It doesn't help if their marketing spend makes $1 million on like jeans in Tokyo, right? Or you've just distributed it in England. Like, that doesn't. There's no
reciprocal value in that.
Yeah. So and that's something a lot of people in the industry are working out, is how to develop shows in concert with brands, such that the shows themselves not only provide conversion, but also like enough data that the spend starts to make sense. Because it's what we've run into a lot. It's like, it's hard to justify the spend if you don't have the info.
Yeah. Where do you see social fitting into this? Is that do you think that becomes one of the primary distribution mechanisms, or is this just an amplification thing for most companies? Depends. It's obviously your perspective.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not. I touch social always sort of as it's always the same. Like, you get a show going, and then we go in a room, there's 30 people, and half of them are some social, and then they tell us all the cool social stuff we're doing. And we're like, awesome, we'll send you clips.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what I think is interesting about social is that people try to engineer viral. I've been on shows where we've tried to do that to help social, and sometimes it works. But mostly, I think the premium content creators it's hard to deliver to that market. Like, the best solution I've always seen, like on Planet of the Apps, is just having an entire digital team, and they just know exactly how to service every vert and every distribution platform, and not merge my world with theirs. If that makes sense. Yeah. Like, it's more like it's really an outsourced kind of world. And then the spend is relative to the space. And then in terms of people try and produce viral videos, and I'm sure viral video people can, but I think when you're making these big shows, it's not a great chase. It's tough. It's tough. Yeah. I'm sure brands face the same thing. They create content, they want it to go viral because it's free.
Well, and then the audience, it feels like, is changing for each of the social platforms, so that changes, and they don't stay static. So you're always having to stay. Yeah,
I always it's weird. I know it was a funky little platform, but Vine was a great example of just it took off. It had its place in the media sphere, and then Twitter just sort of killed it. And it killed the whole concept of that kind of content. Yeah. Maybe we're kind of still there with GIFs, all the
Twitch.
Twitch is another great example. Periscope, I don't chase the tech platforms too much. I've been lucky that I've made a lot of really big premium type shows. Here's a perfect example. So I made Fear Factor this year. I relaunched Fear Factor with Ludacris for MTV. What was really interesting was Chris really wanted to just be Instagramming and from behind the scenes, and just kind of just from day one, because it was nuts what we do, right? And behind the scenes at Fear Factor is actually more insane, right? You know what I mean?
You need to have an unscripted version of behind the scenes.
Listen,
of the unscripted show.
It's pretty formal in terms of safety and stuff like that, because A, we want to keep people safe, and B, it's been made for a long time, so there's just a lot of systems to make it look a lot scarier. But the network didn't want that. I think it was still traditional. Yeah, they wanted to control the channel, and so we were like, 3 days out we'll tweet this, and 5 days out we'll tweet this, and and I was just sort of surprised, because I just thought that type of access is really what people are really enjoying nowadays, and it's not like Fear Factor's got that many spoilers.
Well, but they took a linear view of it when it's less than linear.
I think we would have. Listen, we did great. It was the #1 show on MTV in 4 years or something like that. So, I don't even take credit for that. It's just Fear Factor, and people like it.
There's probably a lot more they could have done with his. A lot of people.
It was just a little. It was a little more control than I would have, especially from MTV. I think you guys.
You have nothing to lose.
I'm so shocked that I don't have
Yeah. Let me ask you this: you've had a pretty amazing arc with your career. If you go back and look at what are the 2 or 3 things that you learned, and you say, "Gosh, thank God I learned this early on," or "God, I screwed this up so bad."
I'm sure I got lots of those. Yeah, and I think this applies to a lot of people who aren't in entertainment but are in the freelance gig economy. It's something I learned early on, and it stood me in really good stead, was I think there's this illusion when you're an independent freelancer that you're only out for yourself. And what I've discovered over the years is that you really operate in our industry in a part of an ecosystem. While you are fighting for your own sort of growth and for your own sort of trajectory, a lot of times you create these loose sort of bands of professional relationships that you rely on. And the stronger those relationships are and your network is and all those nodes, and the more nodes you have, the better built you are for when the industry shifts, for growing. I always say, I mentor a lot of kids, and I always say, figure out what your job is, right? Because TV's like a military. You have a job, and the job has a description, and you do that, and you don't do anything else, right? Or you just got to stay in your lane, right? But I always say, figure out what your job is, and then figure out what your boss's job is. And I'm talking about you're a PA and a key PA, or you're a coordinator and you're a production manager, or you're a supervising producer and a co-EP. Figure out what your job is, and then figure out exactly what your boss's job is. Because unless you're at the very top, your boss is trying to go up. And I think this applies to any freelance world. So if you, my thing was, I always did my job, and I always tried to do as much of my boss's job for them. And then the key is, don't take any credit. Not a lick. because then you're a threat.
Yeah.
Just do the work and make their job easier, because they're going to move up. And then they're going to need someone who could do their job. And you've done it, and you've taken none of the credit, so they feel they can trust you.
Bring you up with you.
Yeah, and so, it's actually like a really net positive way to move through the industry, because you're actually really working hard to make the people around you and above you all move up, because you're moving up as an ecosystem. And in TV, there's like literally like ecosystems of relationships. And every so often I encounter like an alien tribe. And I'm like, who are these people who make TV?
Yeah.
Because it's not that big of an industry ultimately. And that's something that I just think, and also you're outworking people, right? If you're doing your job at 100% and you're doing 30% of your boss's job, you're also over delivering on your own work. And I think that is a really important part of being a freelancer.
You learned that from your mom.
I did learn that from my mom. She said, yeah.
I got to go back to one thing you said there
Yeah.
too, but just in terms of like lessons learned. So
Yeah.
how do you keep going after you had 70 drafts of a script? I mean, is that normal? I mean, it feels like
I didn't. It broke me. No. Let's be clear. I'm not making movies. It had the exact opposite effect on me. Like I wrote 70 drafts, and I realized it was a zero-sum game. If I had written 100 drafts, there was no extra. I wasn't getting any farther.
Interesting.
Right? Like in scripted, you either are the writer or director, or you could write scripts in a coffee shop for 10 years. You work in my side of the business for 10 years, and you're smart, and you work hard, and you're a good person, you're going to make a career.
So that was that binary moment for you?
Yep. I literally was like, it broke me. I was just like, I mean, listen, I just finished my first novel. I'm very much still engaged in, and I actually have a scripted show that's about to go probably. So I'm actually coming right around back to it.
Okay.
At the top.
Yeah.
Ish. Yeah, no, that was a really clear lesson. I'm a big fan of things and careers that don't require you winning the lottery. And maybe it's $1 billion lottery if you create Seinfeld and you're broke otherwise. Like Mark Cherry was like living in his mom's house when he created Desperate Housewives. Like there are those moments. And those occupy all the oxygen in terms of the narrative of what happens in Hollywood. But there's like millions more that are just all starting their career at 30, 35 because they played the zero-sum approach to their career, which is like either make it or I don't, right? And that's why I ultimately went to my side of the TV, was because there was no make it or don't. It was all just a pyramid that you could climb. So, the answer is you don't, in that case. That was a good lesson because it taught me I don't want to be in work, my living be like I work all week really hard, and at the end of the week someone flips a card and I don't get my paycheck.
Yeah.
Right? And that's sort of what trying to be a screenwriter director is, or an actor, right? And then they see the wealth on TV because it's part of the
1% of the 1% who
not
pull
even,
out.
I mean, I went to film school and my whole family, there's a lot of actors in my family and stuff, and I've yet to meet someone who's made it who wasn't already like discovered when they were a kid.
It's hard.
Yeah, and I wouldn't recommend it. Like if someone wants to be an actor, write plays, produce plays, like build a production playhouse with your hands so you can make your own decisions, I don't know.
That's a good lesson.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like hard work being additive, I mean, you can take risks. I mean, I wrote a novel, right? It's like my passion. It's always been writing, and that took me 10 years, and that was just because I enjoyed it. But I didn't need to pay for
life.
I didn't need to pay for life. That was for fun, right? If I were actually trying to make a living off of that, I'd be a disaster.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you what comes next. Sounds like a novel.
Well, interesting. I've been for the longest time I was a freelance executive producer or just producer before that. And then I've worked within a big startup production company that grew a ton. And, I've created a lot of shows, and certainly when I'm hired to make a show, there's oftentimes so much creative that needs to get done. So I just am now more interested, or as interested in the business. I started my company in September, and I think we've sold 6 shows. So I'm focusing on the intersection of content and technology and brand, and trying to really build a business. It's what's interesting to me. I'm not as interested in, what's going to happen at the act out, especially in the type of show I make. I think that you can only go so deep. Even in TV, you can only go so deep. And so, I'm building a production company and hopefully a studio someday.
That's cool.
Yeah. Or I may join a studio at the same time. That could be interesting.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing is for everybody, we've got Charles actually on the road with us August 15th in Hollywood. You're going to talk about this intersection of branding and technology and entertainment, and then we're going to do it again in New York in the middle of September. So we'll hit both coasts. So that'll be fun.
That'll be fun.
And you got a novel. When's that coming out? When's that?
No, I mean, I don't know. I'm not it's zero sum. I mean, I'm looking for.
We're gonna be able to read it somewhere though at some point.
Yes, it's called Twin Paradox. Yeah.
I heard it's good.
Yes.
Friends are whispering back and forth.
Yeah, it's not bad.
That's pretty good.
But thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. It's awesome.
Thanks a lot. It's always fun.
Charles Wachter, he's going to be on the road with us August 15th in Hollywood and New York. Hard 20. Thanks, man.
If you've ever met a famous athlete at a corporate event or gotten an official autograph, chances are Steiner Sports made it happen. Here's Brandon Steiner.
We believe that there's magic in the moments that sports creates. We get customers closer to the game and help companies use the power of sports to grow their business. We've been in business 30 years, and we've had multiple systems to keep track of all the athletes and all of our customers. Multiple systems means multiple headaches. So we made the move to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite lets us replace all of our finance, inventory, and CRM functions with one convenient system. Now all the departments can see the same data. And if I have a question about our business, I can get the answer quickly.
Find out how Steiner Sports scaled their business to millions of customers. Go to netsuite.com/Steiner. You'll also get our free guide titled Overcoming Your 5 Obstacles to Growth. That's netsuite.com/Steiner for our free guide and the story of a great American company.
All right, hope you enjoyed that episode with Charles Wachter. Big thanks to Charles for spending a lot of time with us, walking through some stories of entertainment. Gave you a little bit of an inside baseball look at what's going on in the media world and some super secret insights into how Apple does business. It's kind of cool. Anyways, thanks to everybody as well for helping make this podcast possible. I want to make sure we thank our sponsors as well as the editing crew over at Lampstand and, of course, Kendall Fisher. Adios!
You just listened to the Grow Wire podcast with host Jason Maynard. Make sure to tune in every week for another episode full of tips, tools, and strategies to take your personal and professional growth to the next level. Until next time.